presenter is Ben Peterson, who's active with 350 Madison, and 350 Madison is really gearing up to fight the Enbridge line. So Ben is going to talk about that.
I wanted to, just as like kind of a theme to keep in mind, Pat kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think to keep in mind as we go, as I kind of walk through what's happening with the pipelines and stuff, is that in the face of like the money and the greed and like the power that these groups have, that we really have to do everything we can and be creative and do whatever we can to stop them. So just kind of keep that in mind as we run through. My name is Ben Peterson. I'm a grad student by day, and at night and on the weekends and at lunch and whenever else I can find time. I work with 350 Madison in the tar sands action team. I'm pretty new to this battle. I actually joined 350 just a couple months ago, but my kind of roots to this battle are pretty deep. I grew up in Nakusa, Wisconsin. My mom's in the back, or my dad still lived there, and the Enbridge pipeline runs right through the middle of it. So I've kind of been around it for a long time, but when I went to school out east and lived out east for a while, and was kind of involved with environmental things, paid attention to, you can see where Nakusa is on there. But I followed the Keystone pipeline battle a lot, but I wasn't really that invested in it. Nakusa is right there, just south of Vesper. And didn't really get super involved with it just because I wasn't really personally closely tied to it, which is not the best stance to take. But when I came back to Wisconsin for grad school, I heard a lot about Enbridge and about what was going on, and I realized that this battle was really, it wasn't garnering the national media that Keystone did, but it was really essentially the same battle and possibly bigger, because the capacity for carrying tar sands was a lot higher. So I walked in to the door at 350, Phyllis dumped a whole bunch of work on me, and here I am now, 4 or 5 months later. Sometimes this whole scenario really kind of feels like a movie, and I think part of that, it's probably why I went with like the origin story introduction, but I think part of that is because Enbridge really feels like a comic book villain sometimes. There's just like a lot of kind of things about it that just make it easy to see them in that light. So without going into too much detail on that, you get to see them. I mean, what you saw in the play is really kind of what they look like. But the three things to keep in mind with them is their size, they spill, and they're secretive. They're a huge company. I think it's like $33 billion in revenue every year. They pipe 2.5 million barrels of tar sands oil through the Great Lakes region every single day. And Keystone was capable of 830,000 barrels. So this is 3 times the size of that, and that's what's already in the ground here. If you're interested in more of these details, there's a really good report called Enbridge Over Troubled Water that just came out about a month ago. And I would definitely recommend checking that out. Some members of 350 Madison helped co-author it, and a bunch of other really great people. It's really good. But the spill part was alluded to in the play also. They've had over 800 spills since 2005, but definitely the most prominent one was in the Kalamazoo in 2010, I think, in the summer of 2010. Shut down like 38 miles of the Kalamazoo. The spill went on for over 17 hours. Enbridge wasn't even the one who found it. It was a utilities employee that reported it to them. So they still haven't cleaned it up. It's cost over $1.2 billion, I think, at this point. And it was all tar sands, which people know them to be very carbon intensive as far as burning, but it's also important to know that they're very, very difficult to clean up. the National Academy of Sciences just released a report that said that they should be classified as a completely different substance than regular oil, based on how difficult it was to clean them up. It also said a little bit regarding Enbridge's lack of regard for safety or transparency. The National Transportation Safety Bureau released this really long report that you probably shouldn't read, but there's a really nice section in it that's very politely titled Summary of Enbridge Organizational Deficiencies. And one particular gem from that was, taken together, the evidence suggests that the Marshall accident was the result not of isolated deficiencies in the company's integrity management system, its control center oversight, its PAP, or post-accidental emergency response activities, but rather of an approach to safety that did not adequately address the combined risk, which is just a really polite way of saying they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they don't really care.
And they don't really care.
And they don't really care. And then the last little bit of it is that they're very secretive. That Kalamazoo spill, it took a report by the National Resources Defense Council for them to even admit that it was actually tar sands. They had been telling everyone that it was conventional crude. So they're a bunch of bad actors. And before I get into what they're up to now, I'm going to let Harry talk a little bit about his experience, not with Enbridge, but with TransCanada and what it's like to.
I'm sorry, I don't know if there's room for questions. I actually had one. Where is it now with, I keep knowing it's proposed and we lost the insurance battle. I mean, it won and lost. But have they actually started the 1.2 million pumping?
I will get into that actually right after.
Oh, okay.
So here's.
Okay, because I've lost track.
Okay, yep, no, that's all right. That's
okay,
fine, yeah, I'll get.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, I'll just inject into this presentation a little bit of a personal experience
Harry, go ahead and move
that
the
I
podium.
have.
You can move the podium to
Sure,
wherever
I'm
you want.
fine.
Okay.
I lived in Kansas for 32 years. I had a farm for 32 years in Kansas. I actually lived there about 50 years. And I moved to Madison in 2011. But in 2007, I was approached by TransCanada to be an easement holder for the TransCanada Cushing Keystone XL Cushing extension, which later became the Keystone XL pipeline. And over that period of time between the 7 and 10 construction period, we were able to get them to make a little adjustment in the line, and we were outside of the easement, but we were just adjacent to the property owner that had the easement. So we ended up about 100 yards from the pipeline from our property, and got to watch it with a front row seat. And the reason I'm bringing this to you is that we already have this pipeline, Enbridge pipeline, going clear across Wisconsin. Involves 4 pipelines, 2 that were built in the 60s, 2 that were built in the same time period I'm talking about. But because the easement corridor was established, the landowners really didn't have, they just had to accept it because it was already in place. But we have something that's on the horizon called Line 66, and it was alluded to in the play. Line 66 is going to require an additional easement. And so what we're attempting to do, and we is a huge we with the WISE organization, is to try to empower landowners so that they can avoid the things that I experienced on my farm in Kansas. For instance, when they cross a perennial stream, and I can't emphasize how much this is about water. It's really is, it goes right to the issue, do you want water or do you want oil? Or the old saying, love water, not oil. Because if allowed, and what happened in Kalamazoo, that water is forever altered. I mean, they'll tell you, but it's in the sediments at the bottom of the river, and it may never be totally removed. So there'll always be some constituent of that spill that will come into that water. And for instance, in my instance, and I don't know, can you see this? Okay, this was a stream that I own both sides of, and this is upstream from me. And this is a bridge that they built for the wet trench crossing. A wet trench crossing of a pipeline is where they actually dig down into the sides of the bank.
She wants to see it.
And they go, and the trench is actually laid in there, and the pipe is laid under that, and then it's covered and the stream runs over it for a while. When they built this bridge, I had a little meeting, brought everybody in, and the constructors and the environmental people that had hired, consultants, and then some of the PHMSA people came. And I said, look, that bridge is in danger. I've lived here, 30 years or more. I've seen 5-inch rains, what it does. And they said, don't worry, we're engineers, we know what's going on. Here's a result of a 5-inch rain. And that was a short time after that. And then many of those large 14 foot by 1 foot by 5 foot wide went down into my property.
Mary,
And,
hold it up to the camera.
So, engineers can't always foretell what nature's going to do. So, it comes down to it, over a period of time, they had to trench and bore under a railroad. These are dry conditions. And every night, this large trench, 20 foot deep and long, about 80 foot long, would fill up with clear blue water that was the groundwater. They had gotten into the alluvial water table, and the static pressure was around 15 foot at my well. So this was the water that was coming up. And this is the one that cinched it. And I don't know if you can see this. Right in the center of this photo is the 3-foot pipeline, the open end of it, waiting to be welded onto. And that's my well water. And this is where this pipeline sets. It sets in the water table. And there is no regulation or no safety other than it's just the way it is. We dig a trench, we lay the pipe in. If the groundwater comes up to it, don't worry, the wells are good. Well, what I found out is that information, that the wells, that you want to know about the radiological data, because they do have to weld every, they have to X-ray every welded joint on these big pipelines. That is a proprietary property of the pipeline company. And the regulators have to appeal to them to be able to view that evidence. Now it really begs the question, if it's evidence of safety, why isn't it a matter of public record that could be accessed maybe in the courthouse of the county that the pipeline occurs in? Well, there's a good reason. So I'm going to cut to the chase here. What we're about is WISE, because this is history. The pipe's in the ground, it's 500,000 barrels a day running by, and it's on its way to Cushing. Line 66 is going to open a new chapter here in Wisconsin, and there's going to be possibilities for landowners to revisit the easement question. And what we want to do is we want, as a group, to help the landowner to have some strength and to have a position so that they can advocate for themselves in this. And I kind of put these together, a few of the things. Easements, and if you would ask everybody in 1960 in Kansas in the mid-2000s, well, what was that easement agreement? What was it? What did you put in it? You'd find out they didn't put anything in it. It was the easement agreement that TransCanada and Enbridge puts together, pushes across the kitchen table, and the farmer has the option to sign it. If he doesn't want to sign it and take that price, he can risk going to eminent domain and then he would get what they call fair market value, which in many instances on a linear acreage isn't much. Could be as little as a third or so. And then you have the legal expenses of going into court. In Kansas, we had 2 individuals in the county I was in that went to court to fight the eminent domain. These are bench decisions, and it took longer to walk into the courtroom than it did for the judge to issue the edict that you lose your land. So it isn't a good track record. So what we're saying is, we think the landowner should have his concerns expressed in the easement agreement. And I'm just saying here, like, when term could be, spell out the specific end date of the easement with provisions for complete removal of the pipe and any associated equipment from the easement and restoration of original landscape. Easement holder may be required to secure a bond to guarantee the cost of the pipe removal and third-party oversight of any environmental problems and mitigation that would occur with the pipe removal activities. So right now, there is no requirement that that pipe, and in the case of the 961, 42 inches in diameter, will ever have to be removed from the ground it's in. Another one, landowner needs to be named in an insurance policy by easement holder to cover the pipeline spill damages to easement and landowner's adjacent property. Recommend that the policy be an environmental impact liability insurance in an amount sufficient to deal with potential damages, particularly to water resources. A simple ask, insurance, third party, just like we are all required to do with our automobiles. 3, easement cannot be sold or transferred without notification to landowner and a renegotiation of easement terms. 1960, when these 2 lines were put in, they were put in and it was another oil company or a pipeline company. Enbridge acquires in a purchase the easement, and then in 2007 comes back and builds 2 lines, new lines in there. Nothing the landowner can do. All they can do is watch the trenching. And of course, a lot had happened between 1960 and 2007. Homes had been built, buildings, all kinds of structures. People's lives were upset. So this would be something that original owner has the easement, we renegotiate. And then the other one I just put in is that easement holder will be required to bore all pipeline crossings of perennial streams. And right now, it's only federal navigable streams or rivers, water courses. It means that you have to dig a hole some distance from the water course and then bore a tunnel underneath adequate protection so that you don't destroy or disturb the riparian area, and then you push the pipe through. And then there's always the question of aggregates that are in the borehole that would scrape or damage the pipeline coating. So it's not a perfect storm, but I've got a picture over there of what a riparian area looks like when they get done. They basically rip-wrap it, and there could be no trees planted on that. So, and in Wisconsin, I think the bored lines are under the Wisconsin River, and I don't know, there were just a minimal amount of river crossings that had to be bored. The rest of them were wet trench. So that's basically what I wanted to bring to this.
I like your easements. Did you draft them or you?
Yeah, I did, and with some, work. The insurance one I kind of borrowed because we had an ask in Dane County that said, how about third-party insurance for us?
Right.
And that was ignited the big fight that we have and still ongoing, that special legislation was passed that basically preempts a county to ever be able to ask for insurance. And it really goes to the question of if these are so safe and you are so sure about the operation of these, why would you be reluctant to expose yourself to an actuary and have them figure the risk?
It's great because the new line, they're justifying it because the old line is leaking and it's become very risky. So they have to put a new line in because the old line is unsafe.
So I'll get it back to Ben to finish up, and then I guess we'll go to a little bit of discussion.
Yeah, I don't really want to take too much time just because I want if there's
Wait,
any pressing
one
questions,
question.
I guess.
You said WISE, is that an organization?
Yes, Wisconsin Safe Energy Alliance.
Alliance, yeah. But so the last thing I wanted to highlight, I guess, was just kind of what is happening now. So I don't know how familiar people are with the lawsuit that's happening. I could kind of skim over that if people are really familiar with it. So Dane County, so this is kind of the idea of us, trying to protect ourselves and them using their muscle to try to, push it down and keep their profits higher. But they, so when they're putting in the expansion for line 61, they kind of, it's Walker's DNR, so it was pretty easy to get it through for them, but they didn't have to get an additional environmental impact statement because they claimed that it was written into the original permit, despite the original permit saying nothing at all about an expansion. But what they did have to do is they had to get conditional use permits from each of the counties where they were going to build one of the pump stations. Unfortunately for them, one of those pump stations was in Dane County, where we were able, among other groups, I think as well, were able to pressure, as Harry said, pressure the Dane County Zoning Commission into getting, to securing additional spill insurance from Enbridge before granted their permit. While they didn't like that very much, they don't take credit for it, but there were 4 lobbyists working with state legislators around the time, so I'm assuming that they had something to do with it. But some very specific language appeared in the budget bill last summer saying that counties were not allowed to require spill insurance from interstate or from companies operating interstate hazardous material pipelines, which is very specific wording. But basically saying that Dane County couldn't enforce that ordinance. What it didn't do is it was not retroactive, so the ordinance was still on the books, and it didn't prevent citizens from trying to enforce those ordinances. So since they gave us a foothold, we took the foothold, and there are now 7 landowners kind of in the town, like in the Marshall, Medina area, that are suing to have that condition enforced. And that's actually, I think the next act in that play will be April 11th at the Dane County Courthouse. So we'd love to have your support there.
Is that an evening meeting?
It is
1:30.
at 1:30. Thank you, Peter. And then quickly too, the line, the bigger battle that's kind of coming down the pipeline, no pun intended with that, but is the construction of 66. And Enbridge is going to do everything they can to prevent us and landowners and activists from, protecting ourselves and protecting the environment that we love. And they've already started. Also in that budget bill, there was a little bit of language that was expanding the eminent domain, and they did admit and bragged about being involved with the wording on that one. So they're getting ready. They're trying to expand their muscle, and what we're going to have to do is we need to do every single thing we can to try to stop them from doing that. And things have already started going. As Harry said, there's landowners along the line are beginning to organize. There's a group called Sacred Water, I think, or Sacred Water, Sacred Land, that's marching along the pipeline, I think starting in May, 33 days on the pipeline. And then it's right here in Dane County, I think we're still in Dane County. In Madison, there's things going on. 350 Madison, we're working on getting the word out. We're having movie showings May 25th at the Barrymore. This changes everything. You guys should come. People, we're working with media organizations. We're working with the radio. We're trying to get the word out. We're talking to legislators, looking out for any more of these crazy bills. We are essentially doing everything we can, every legal means that we can, to try to be prepared for this and stop Enbridge. But, as Peter likes to say, you can't necessarily always stop a multi-billion-dollar company through normal legal means. And if it comes down to it, our backs are up against the wall climatically at this point, and we're willing to do anything that it takes to stop this pipeline from happening. And we have people who are ready and willing to go out to Medina, to wherever this construction is taking place, and do what so many people have done in the past. Chain themselves to bulldozers, get in the way, lay down in front of it, and physically prevent it from happening. But the problem with that is that we need more people from that. Like, this isn't just like an environmental issue anymore. Like, with all of like the environmental justice issues and the land owner rights and all of these things that are going on, this has really become an issue for all of us. Whether or not you care about the climate or clean water or anything, this is a battle that we all need to be a part of, and we all need to take a stand on. So if you're interested and you want to help, I highly encourage you to come talk to us at 350 Madison. Might be signaling that we're done.
I hope that's a warning.
That's a dinner bell. That's a dinner
That's
bell.
a warning.
But there's a table out. Talk to anyone wearing a 350 Madison t-shirt. We'd be more than happy to help you get involved. There's no barrier to entry. As I said, I was plunked into things as soon as I got going. There's many ways you can be involved. Whatever.
Yeah, one thing too that we'd include. Wednesday, April 13th, and it's the Lowell Center. It's down here on the campus. We're going to have Jane Klebb. Jane Klebb is the organizer that formed Bold, Nebraska. That's directly responsible for the KXL win. And she's coming. She's been here. She was here last winter.
What
She's
time?
coming again. It's going to be at, doors open at 6, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock for the talk.
The venue?
And,
Lowell Center.
yeah, and there's a handout like this at the Tar Sands 350 table. And it'll be an opportunity. Mark Borcott, he's from up at Marshfield. And he has organized a landowner group up on the pipeline, and I went up to a meeting and was a part of that meeting in early March, and he is very, very active, and they have a good solid group of landowners that are opposing this Line 66 expansion. And we had, Enbridge was in the room, and let me tell you, they kicked the rears.
I'm Phyllis Hasbrook. I'm a coordinator of Madison 350, and we're also involved in a campaign to get a new town board member in the town of Medina who wants to stand up to Enbridge. So we have some tasks to do on election day. If anybody would be willing to take a 2-hour shift to hold up a banner for our candidate out just far enough away from the poll to be legal, then please talk to me, because
Who is the candidate?
his name is Brian Meunier. He's never been involved in politics before, but he wants to stand up to Enbridge, and we need more people like that on that town board.
And that's this coming Tuesday.
Of course.
And about how far away from Madison is Medina?
It's a half an hour from the Capitol. Yeah. And Oh, and also, if you want to get involved in 350 Madison, our monthly meeting is always the first Monday of the month at 7 p.m., so that's this Monday.
Where?
And it's at the Friends Meeting House, which if you know Monroe Street in Madison, it's the street, turn right before you get to the Trader Joe's. What is the name of that street?
Roberts?
Spooner.
Oh,
Spooner
you
goes to
turn on
Roberts
Spooner.
Court.
To
Yep.
Roberts.
And it's just like one block in and there it is.
It's
So,
behind the bank.
behind the bank. And then also, these are just such amazing resources, and it would be a shame if they got stuck in one of our files, right? So I was thinking the thing to do would be go to any printer or office supply store and get it laminated, then you can see both sides, and then donate it to a teacher or someone who owns a business, you know, a coffee house or something. Maybe they would hang it up, or give it to your legislator. Maybe they would hang it up in their office, because a lot of people need to see them, and you know, students could make whole reports based on one of these, and that's the way to use them better.
Okay, so just point of information, thank you, Phyllis, that's all important. The really good news is we are right across the hall from the cafeteria, so you won't have to spend any time in the halls or any time getting lost. I feel confident that Pat and Ben and Harry will stay and answer questions for people who want to stay. But I do want to let you know that lunch is beginning in the cafeteria, which is right across the hall. So feel free to stay and talk, but you know, like you might want to let them go by 12:15 or so. But they're here.
I don't have anywhere to go.
Oh, okay. Ben says he doesn't have anywhere to be.
My name's John. I work with Family Farm Defenders, and just to let people know, one strategy we can talk about here all is land trusts. I mean, take a prickly pear approach, or porcupine approach to any bridge or any pipeline. Make your land more valuable, make it really hard to fight you. So being in a land trust gives you a lot more legal power. And my folks were able to get a gas pipeline that had to go all the way around their farm because it was in a land trust. And this was in Minnesota. So it's something to be thinking about. And organic certification. We had a whole discussion on this at the Organic Farming Conference. If you're farm certified organic and they mess up your farm, you have a lot more power in court to fight it. So there's things you can do as a private landowner that make you a lot harder for them to take your land away or force an easement on you. And a land trust is a really good strategy. Really good strategy. So something to think about, like this group of farmers meeting, they should be forming a land trust. Boom. And, yeah.
Thank you, John.
Well,
So anyways, yeah. And we've already talked about this. We've talked about
You
this.
can attend, because Mark will be there.
Information after the April 11th, 1:30.
I think so.
Okay.
April 11th, 1:30, Dane County Courthouse.
Yes.
Yep.
Judge Neese, N-I-E-S-S, that's the courtroom. Richard
Yeah.
Neese.
I just wanted to say that civil disobedience, acts of civil disobedience don't have to be as scary as what Harry made them sound. Because I was arrested in DC, it was catch and release. No big deal. They put us in the van, they took us to the police station, they had us pay our $200 fine, and we walked out the door.
But when Michael Bloomberg got everybody at the Democratic Convention, that was not fun. People were
No, but I mean, there's a spectrum.
Right.
But Julie there is training available for it as well. It's not like you don't just get thrown kind of out there in the woods.
But ultimately, this is the moral challenge of our lifetime and for all our kids. We have to decide if we're just gonna write little email tags to you, just here, or put your body on the line. And that's the time it is. It's time that we have to decide, each one of us, how much we really care about our kids and our grandkids.
And it works better if we have large numbers.
If we have large numbers,
The success of the Pinocchio, a large part of the success of the Pinocchio thing was this multiple prong, but remember that the economics actually drove away the mind.
Right.
And it's very important to realize that part of the moral challenge that we have is that a third of our average household energy use is in the form of hot water, which is actually generated. If you look at the charts now, it's very clear that the majority of natural gas that is being produced in the United States is being done so with frac sand mining. Okay, so if you can turn your hot water heater down to 110 degrees, you can develop a culture, this undercuts the economics, and there are a lot of retired people who will not go, who do not have time to go to the front line, but who appreciate the efforts that are being done. We have a monster, whether it's the utility scales, the transmission lines create the corridors for the gas lines create the corridors for the transmission lines. We have to choke this monster off 1 kilowatt, 1 BTU at a time, and use that economic power that we have in our houses, in our businesses to do that. Otherwise, we're losing the largest economic lever of this whole thing. Because $200 is a lot of money to get in a court, but if it's just a splash in the bucket for the legal money that the utilities have.
And there's true value in networking, because this last week, Forrest and Rob and a few others worked on, did most of the work on a couple of posters regarding a third of household energy use is hot water heated by natural gas. And there's some tips. And a third of the household energy use in hot water is heated by natural gas. So some more
Energy use
tips.
is flat. Their utilities are not making money on selling us gas or selling us electricity anymore. They're making money by building capital projects that they get a guaranteed 10% return over 30-year capitalization. $40 to $50 of the average $100 electric bill goes to utility debt, to Wall Street.
Yeah.
So to forget that we have the power to choke that economics off in our households is, I think, immoral.
And that's the repower issue.
Forrest has been very patient in the back with his answers, so.
Well, and really it's the moral question comes down to individual decisions on so many levels, and but it's exciting to see that this collective action is starting to pick up steam, because I think it's what it's coming to. You know, it's really important that we all make those individual decisions, but now I think coming together, and that is starting to happen. I just wanted to mention, it hasn't been mentioned today, that while this tar sands is the biggest carbon bomb on the planet, fracking is the methane bomb going on right now, and that finally the studies by Graphia and some other folks are getting some attention on the national media, and that methane is as large, if not a larger problem in the short run for the climate than carbon. And so it's really important to focus on that, and just realize that all our efforts on frac sand mining tie right into the climate just as much as anything else does.
It's all together.
The previous efforts on civil disobedience at the site of these things being constructed have been just tens of people. But we have here in Wisconsin the unique feature of anywhere else that we know of in this country, where the pipeline, the new pipeline, is 15 miles from Madison, where 125,000 people stormed the Capitol in 2011. If we can get a couple of thousand people even out there, they can't arrest you because there's too many. So the incredibly powerful tool we have is the proximity, for the first time, of that pipeline next to a progressive city. Let's take advantage of that.
Thank you.
One other thing that I'm just going to add this, I just learned this week that there's such a plethora or a huge amount of gas, crude, that they don't know what to do with it. So now they're storing it in tankers in various parts. In fact, people around Chippewa Falls have seen these tankers. And we need to be looking for these tankers that are holding this crude out in the spurs and so on where the railroads are. Yeah, that's
When you say crude, you mean crude oil or gas?
Crude oil, they're storing it on various communities, places where
Rail
there are
cars,
spurs.
yeah.
So what's in all the trains out along the marsh?
I don't know if,
On the way from Sauk City, it goes
78,
forever.
are they sand?
It's a storing of the use.
Are they black tankers?
Yeah, they're
Oh,
But
okay.
they're just sitting there, they've been there for a while.
they could be storing something that.
And nobody knows.
Yeah.
So, thank you to Pat
Yeah.
Popple, thank you to Ben Peterson, thank you to Larry Bennett. You can probably talk to them during lunch or wherever. 350